Okay, folks, welcome back. If you are in the room or if you are joining us online, I'm sure that everybody will agree that was a great session that we had before there. Lots of things for us to sort of think about and lots of good conversation in the break as well. As I sort of said just before the break, our next speaker this evening is Emma Turner, and Emma has written the book Be More Toddler, which I've explained is about taking leadership opportunities, or taking leadership lessons from our smallest learners. I've also mentioned that Emma has been unable to join us this evening due to some unforeseen circumstances. She assures me that's not because of the weather around that, but actually because for other reasons. And I just kind of want to say a big thank you to our technical folks and the sort of the wider SLF team, and indeed for Emma for still being able to sort of come along and do a live broadcast here in what's been sort of quite challenging circumstances. So I'm going to hand over to Emma in a minute because you want to hear from her, not from me, but maybe just a little bit about her first. So Emma works for the Discovery Trust in England, which is as professional learning lead, and she's worked in primary schools for 24 years and within the senior leadership in primary schools for 18 years. Emma is the author of several educational books specialising in flexible working, cognitive science, leadership and curriculum, and then including the book, as I've already mentioned, Be More Toddler. And we've got some copies of that book available if you've not got one at the moment. I think all of these topics, flexible working, cognitive science, leadership and curriculum, and this idea of leadership behaviour are really, really important at the moment for Scottish education, and indeed fit into some of the questions that we had, from the panel earlier on as well. So we're really looking forward to Emma sharing her perspectives with us. Emma, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Hello. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for coming along. And listen, thank you so much for your flexibility and willingness to sort of to join us online. Is it true? It's not because of the weather, and it's not because you're actually in Barbados, is it? It's something else.
I'm broadcasting live from my understairs cupboard, which is not terribly glamorous, I'm afraid.
You're like Harry Potter, Emma, another famous book. But we're here to talk about your other book this evening. So Emma, over to you.
Oh, thank you so much. If I can just see my slides, I think somebody's going to push those through for me so I can see those. There we go. So thank you for having me. As I said, I would really have loved to have been there in person, but unfortunately we had a family bereavement, which has kind of impacted on childcare. So I was unable to come. So I'm so sorry. I was really looking forward to coming back to Scotland because the last time I was there, I was 10 and learning to ski in Aviemore. I'm hoping that this session doesn't crash like I did so many times when I was up there in Aviemore, but I do apologise for not being there. As you'll see there, the title of my book is Be More Toddler. That was my first book, and the little tiger that's on the front of the book is actually my little boy, my youngest child there. So there'll be lots of pictures of children today illustrating kind of leadership lessons that we can take from our very, very youngest learners. Now, the reason I wrote Be More Toddler was very specific. I was working as a head teacher based in Leicestershire down in England, and I was on maternity leave with my youngest child. And I went to a soft play centre, which I never recommend with 3 children under 5. But I went there and I bumped into a former head teacher that I'd worked with, and he said to me, it's so lovely to see you. He was there with his grandchildren. I was there with my 3 children. We compared notes about our leadership journeys. And he said, oh, you were always going to do great things. You were always so brilliant. You were always so motivated and positive about education. And then he sort of went off and did what he was going to do. And I sat there and I went to text a colleague to say, guess who I've seen? And then all of a sudden, I was really disheartened because I suddenly realised he'd spoken about me totally in the past tense, like my leadership journey was over. Like somehow, because I was there with 3 very small children, that was the end of my leadership career. And I felt momentarily really disheartened. And then my middle daughter, who was 2 at the time, was trying to get up a really difficult steep slope at the soft play, and she fell down. And then she got up again and she fell down again. And then she got up and fell down, got up and fell down. And I thought to myself, that's the attitude I need to channel right now. I need to be like her. I need to kind of look at all these hurdles of balancing leadership and parenthood and life. And I need to be more like her, be more toddler. And then I sort of had a bit of an epiphany in a soft play ball pit, which is not normally where people have an epiphany. And I thought, isn't it amazing what toddlers actually achieve in terms of leadership? And what I noticed was this, that you never go into a household and not realize there's a toddler there. So if a toddler lives in a household, you will notice their influence everywhere. They are masters of whole scale organizational change. They change every single aspect of a family's life, where they eat, their leisure activities, how they sleep. Well, mine never slept, we never quite cracked that one. But what they do is completely upend and change people's lives. And they are not necessarily qualified, experienced leaders. Most of them can't even use a spoon yet. So how do they manage to change whole lives? And I thought about this and I started to study toddler behaviours and the influence that toddlers had. And I began to wonder, how is it that the smallest chicks rule the roost? And I started to think about my own leadership journey and think, I don't need to be a certain type of leader. And there are so many people out there who have leadership capacity, either in their classrooms or their organisations or across whole schools or trusts or authorities, who don't see themselves as leaders. They don't see themselves fitting the traditional leadership mold or the traditional leadership narrative. And what I wanted to do was show that anybody can do leadership. We can think about leadership differently. We can learn from the most effective leaders of all, which are toddlers, and think about how is it that they manage to rule the roost and make change when they're so little and they don't necessarily have an enormously big voice. And so one of the things I began to think about was, how do they do it when they're not necessarily superheroes? And again, that's my two youngest ones there. They are not superheroes, but they make these changes. And I'm thinking, I'm not a superhero as a leader, as an educator. So how do I make change in a system, either in a school or across a trust or across an organization? How do I do it? How do we make those changes? So the first thing is all about culture. It's about building a culture where people can thrive. And when we bring up toddlers in our homes and in our families, this is what we do. We build the culture where those toddlers can thrive and where we can thrive as a family. And we do this by making sure that we tap in to moral purpose. So whether you're leading a classroom, whether you're leading a school, whether you're leading an organization, the first thing is to develop a culture that is led by a real deep understanding of moral purpose. Why are we doing what we're doing? What is the big question? What are we trying to achieve? What are the big outcomes that we want? And is everybody in our organization clear about those? Do they buy into those? And are they with us on this journey? And in terms of toddlers, that's the bit where nobody wants to be the parent who says, I've had enough of this. I'm going, right, kids, you look after yourselves. I'm off down to the coffee shop for a big latte and a nice slice of cake. You can look after yourselves. Nobody wants to do that. We're morally obliged to stay and look after those children. We are really driven by a clear moral purpose, and that's also what we need in our organizations. Why are we doing what we're doing? What is the right thing to do? The next thing is this idea of emotional buy-in. Now, most of parenting, especially of toddlers, is not glamorous at all. It's exhausting. It's occasionally hilarious. But most of the time when my three were very little, I was covered in yogurt. I had Cheerios stuck in my hair. I was permanently exhausted. But I loved what I was doing. I absolutely loved being around them. And it's creating cultures where you have got that emotional buy-in, where people love coming to do the work where you are. So it's creating great places for people to work. It's recognizing that teachers need to be enabled to teach. They need to be freed up from all the extraneous nonsense that we often ask teachers to do and focus on what really matters and what they train for, which is to teach young people. So it's creating systems and structures which enable teachers to teach, so they love coming to work and you get that emotional buy-in in your organizations. And the next thing is that you've got a really clear, shared, well understood plan in your culture. And this is a little bit like when you have a toddler in your house, everybody, regardless of who they are, who visits your house, knows about the expectations for that toddler. You know, you're not going to expect them to nip into the kitchen and whip you up a 5-course dinner. neither are you going to expect them to be able to do complete self-care, but they might be at the point where they're just starting to put their own shoe on. So everybody knows that when a child is a toddler, they can probably just start to put their own coat on and just start to put their own shoe on. And so in our organizations, we need to make sure that we're kind of getting the shoe on the right foot. We need to make sure that we've explained to everybody in our organization what it is we're trying to achieve and what the plan is to do that, where we are in that journey. In terms of evidencing that, then, if you've got your culture right in your organization to develop great people and to develop great teachers and develop great young learners, you will be able to see it everywhere you look in your building. And this is not about what's laminated on the walls or what's been put on some expensive signage, but you can actually see it happening. You can also hear it in the conversations people are having, in the way people interact with each other, in the way they talk about their work. And then also you can feel it. I go into hundreds of schools across England, and some places I walk into and I can just feel that it is a wonderful place to work and to learn. Other places I go in, not so much. They might have a wonderful strap line over the doorway, or they may profess to do all of these wonderful things, but you walk in and it just doesn't grab you. It just doesn't get you in the heart, basically. So how do we do this? The first thing then is, if we're talking about seeing it, so at first glance, do people in your classroom or your organization know what you stand for? And can they see it everywhere? Would we look in every single corner of your organization and be able to see it? Is it represented in the way people act, in the way children engage with their learning, in the relationships that teachers and pupils have? And is it absolutely everywhere, or just front of house? You know, would we see this across your organization? Because we haven't made whole-scale cultural change unless we can see it everywhere. And a bit like the toddler's household, they're evident in every single room in that house. There's the step stool in the bathroom near the sink. There's the pushchair in the porch. There's the little tiny cutlery in the cutlery drawer. Everywhere you look, there's evidence of that. And then it's about clarity and consistency. Now, this isn't about kind of blind conformity. This is about being really consistent about the things that matter, that moral purpose. So really holding on to the things that you believe in and being consistent with that across everything that you do. In terms of hearing it then, what do we mean by that? Is you hear people talk about their work with positive regard. You know, people aren't moaning, and there's a difference between somebody having a bit of a grump because the photocopy is broken compared to actually constantly having a negative talk about the organization. So you know you've got a great culture when people are talking about their work with positive regard. We also hear conversations that have clarity and purpose. So when people talk about their work to you, it's with a real clarity around what the organisation is trying to achieve, how they're developing professionally, how they're moving learning on for the children in their care. There's clarity and purpose to professional conversation. And the next one is about suggestions being shared without fear. You know you've got a great culture where people can thrive, when people can make suggestions without fear of reprisals or being kind of laughed at or made fun of or told, no, that's not how we're doing here, you know, just meeting with a brick wall. So being open to suggestions. When people are talking, conversations are improvement focused. So all the conversations that you have in your organization about how can we get better? So how can we improve what we're doing? Like better never stops. How can we get better? And all the conversations are geared around that. Conversely, there's a lack of negative conversation and things are geared towards success. That doesn't mean to say you don't recognize when things are going a little bit wrong, but actually overall conversations are positive. You also know you've got a great culture when you feel it. Like I say, I walk into some schools and you can just tell that they are happy, motivated, purposeful places to work. And most of the time, that's because there's a real synchronicity between what the leadership of that organization is saying and then what actually happens. It's one thing saying you believe in it and putting it on your letterhead and your sweatshirt. It's another one entirely to make sure that the actions, every little action during the day is synchronous with that, is synchronized with that. And then also schools where there are great cultures are the ones who are willing to support and share. They're not the ones that are kind of metaphorically doing this and scribbling their answers. They are ones who are outward facing, who say, we haven't necessarily got everything right, but come and learn what is going right here and bring along your great ideas and we can share them. Education is a zero-sum game. There are no winners in education, but there are lots of potential losers unless we work really hard together to build that culture where we are keen to support and to share. So it's all about clarity then. It's having a real clarity about what your organisation wants to achieve. In terms of clarity then, what do we mean by clarity? What are we talking about? Well, the first one is about, you know, your final destination, the end point for your children, your phase. Have you defined that? Does everybody know that? And then defining what success looks like. The previous panel were talking about assessment, but it's much broader than that. You know, what behaviours, what attitudes, how do we want children to think? What experiences do we want them to have? How do we want them to use technology? What does success look like in not just the things that are directly measurable, but the things that have great impact on children in the future? So that end of phase child. We also need to have clarity about behaviour, both behaviour for children and the professional behaviours of our staff as well. The environment that we create and the curriculums that we develop, there needs to be clarity around those in a school, otherwise we're not going to move things forward. Linked to that is obviously the associated professional development and career planning for our staff. Staff are our greatest resource that we have. They are the greatest resource any school has, and we need to have clarity about how we best develop those people in our organisation. Also, improvement points and current work. The number of schools that I visit and I say, you know, what's the school working on? I say that to the staff and I'm just kind of met with a bit of a blank look. Do people in our organisation know what we're trying to improve, or is that just sitting with the senior leadership teams in our schools? The profiles of our cohorts as well. So in our organisations, what are our cohorts like? They're not all the same. They never are. So what are the profiles of our cohorts and what are we doing to meet the needs of our individual cohorts? And then well-being of our staff and of our pupils. And that's not about putting cake in the staff room. It's about creating that culture where teachers and pupils can thrive. What are people responsible for? And then in terms of overall achievement, what do we expect as a school? So we have to have clarity about that. But how do we get that? How do we get that clarity? Well, this is how we get it. It's all about celery and chocolate. And this goes back to my toddler book where we say, I don't know if you've ever tried taking chocolate off a toddler. It's absolutely impossible. Absolutely impossible. And for example, I was in the post office with my eldest daughter when she was about 18 months old. And we were waiting, queuing up for something. And she reached over and she took a packet of chocolate buttons off the counter. And she held on to it. And I said, no, darling, we're not buying those today. Nearly lunchtime. Well, and she just held onto them and she gripped onto them and she was not going to relinquish those chocolate buttons. Come hell or high water, she was hanging on to those. And she was holding on to them, not in the end necessarily because she wanted chocolate, but because it's what she believed in. She believed that was the right thing for that moment. Conversely, all of my children, who are all very different, hate celery. And it doesn't matter how much I try to chop it, fricassee it, saute it, hide it in things. They find it, they will not stand for it. It's an absolute no in our household. And we need to do this in our organisations. What are our chocolate buttons in our organisation? And what is the celery? What are the things that as an organisation or as a leader we stand for, we will fight for and we believe in, and we will not be pulled off course from that at all? That's the chocolate buttons. Define those. What do we believe in? And then the other things are the things that we will not tolerate. What are the things that we will rail against, that it's an absolute hard no for our organisation? Defining those and sharing those with staff or the pupils, the people we work with, is so important in determining a culture and developing that culture. Because what it does is it gives us a filter for decision making, because then we've got, through our filter, multiple ideas coming in. There's so many ideas in education, a different idea every day. It has to go through the filter of our organisation. It has to go through our core purpose, our main aims, our chocolate buttons, our celery, our end of phase child, all of those things that are about the clarity of our organisation. And only those ideas which pass through those filters are the ones that we use in our organisation. So it's the celery and the chocolate buttons which help you to make those leadership decisions. And recognising that not every idea is a good idea for now. And the way I explain it is sometimes you get given a bag of clothes for your toddler, a set of generous hand-me-downs from a well-meaning relative. Most of the time, they aren't the right size. They're lovely, they're going to be brilliant, they're going to be great in the future, not for now. And in the same way that we wouldn't put a pair of oversized trousers on a child who then toddles over and smacks their head into the coffee table, same that we with an idea in education. We need to have the confidence to say, it's a great idea, but not for now or not for here. So it's having that that confidence to say that the decision is a good decision, but not for us and not for now. The other thing in leadership and in education that we need to do is to take risks. I don't mean be reckless, but I mean innovate, take a risk. And this is my little boy here deciding that no, he wasn't going to hold on to the reins that we had. He was going off and having his own adventure. He was off to explore another corner of that park, despite my best efforts to try and keep hold of him. But because what we need to recognize that actually, if we do appropriate risk assessments and we analyze, and it's informed by what we know about our demographics and what we know about educational research and what we know about our cohorts and our schools and our staffing, when we innovate and take a risk, if it's a strategic informed risk, it's actually an adventure. And we need to have more adventures in education to innovate. If we do what we've always done, we will get what we've always got. So it's channeling a little bit of that little fella's face and having educational adventure. Because if we've got really clear alignment in our vision and our plans, we've got clarity about everything that we're trying to do, then what we're actually doing is getting the shoe on the right foot. We're encouraging people to take that next step and to bring together everything that we've set out in terms of what we stand for and what we don't stand for, clearly aligned plans, clear direction, giving people the courage to have a go on their own and to innovate. This little diagram here, however, is an interesting one. So lots of schools that I work with work very hard on their vision and values for their school. We talk a lot about what they stand for and what they don't stand for. And when they've done that, some schools, not all schools, will say, brilliant, we're done now. We've got the vision, things will improve. Well, just writing the vision statement doesn't improve anything. Then we go to the point where we write the action plans for whatever we're doing. And clearly align those with all the staff. And actually, we've got the vision, we've got the plans, surely the improvement must come now. Well, actually, what needs to happen is that when we implement them, we need to start checking in with them. And this is what our toddlers do all the time. They come back and go, look at this, mummy, or look at this, daddy, or look at this, nanny, look at this, granddad. How am I doing? They constantly ask for this kind of feedback loop to be closed, and they check in. And that's what we want to do in our organizations, is not to check up on people, but to check in with people. How's it going towards our clearly defined vision and our clearly aligned plans of how to get there? So once we've done the action plans in our schools, once they've been written, they need to be shared. People need to understand them, that have got that emotional buy-in, the moral purpose. And then we need to check in and say, how far are we along this journey to getting there? And the way that I explain this is a journey with a toddler or a journey with a young person who constantly says, are we there yet? And the reason I picked on this one is because actually, when you're driving and it's constantly, are we there yet? Are we there yet? On first glance, it can seem a little bit grating, but actually what I noticed was, what they said was, are we there yet? Toddler or child will never say, am I there yet? They say, are we there yet? They know we're trying to get somewhere, but they know that nothing is going to change. They're out, they're not going to arrive at their destination unless we all arrive there. So what I learned from my younger children when they were saying, are we there yet? Is the importance of recognizing that progress is never made in an organization unless it's the contribution from everybody, and we all have to arrive together. There is no point one person flying out ahead to get there before anybody else, because it's impossible. In an organization or a school, we all get there together. So we have to have that clearly aligned strategic direction that final destination, the end of phase child, so that we can say to colleagues, not have you done this, have you done that, I need to check this, I need to check that, but how's it going? How far along this journey are you? What support do you need? How can I help you? What can I do to support you so we can all get there? And it changes the dynamic of the conversation completely. And I've worked with hundreds of schools on this model, the checking in with people, not checking up with people. And it works like a charm. When people actually understand and are brought into the conversation about this is where we're all trying to go, this is our clear, shared understanding, and are we there yet? It completely changes the culture in schools and in terms of thinking about culture change. The next bit is about my eldest daughter, who, when she was about 2, we've been practicing throwing a ball backwards and forwards. Actually, she's probably a bit younger, probably about 18 months old. We've been throwing a ball backwards and forwards to each other all morning, and then she had her lunch. And I made her, for the very first time, a soft-boiled egg. And I gave her the egg and I put a spoon in it and I turned around to put something in the sink, and this egg whistled past my ear, smashed into the wall and slid all the way down it. And I just kind of went, oh, right, okay, we're all now covered in egg. And it wasn't because she was being naughty. It was because we'd spent all morning practicing throwing, and I'd handed her something that was pretty much a ball-shaped object, which she'd then thrown again. And what I noticed was, actually, that was a really good throw. She's only tiny, and she's managed to lob it the entire length of the kitchen overarm. Now, that was the first indication that she was going to be some kind of athlete. And I don't know whether you can see behind me, but there are lots and lots of trophies there. They are her athletics trophies now. That was the first indication that actually she had a real talent. And so one thing that my toddlers taught me was, when I'm working in an organization, is sometimes the way people reveal their talent, or the way potentially a mini crisis throws up the fact that somebody was absolutely amazing in that crisis or came up with a brilliant idea, can be a springboard to improvement. And actually looking at each challenge that you've got in school as a potential opportunity to develop somebody or something is a real lever for making changes and improvements in your class or your organization. So looking at the moment where the egg has been thrown and thinking, okay, who's kind of rising to the challenge here? Who's demonstrating that they've got amazing talent in this particular situation? How can we build on that to best serve our staff and our pupils? Where are people's hidden egg throwing talents? The next one that I noticed about the children was this one, and it's linked to feedback, professional feedback. Now, my middle daughter, we were driving home from my parents' house one day, and she said, look, mummy, look at the sky, look at the sky. I said, yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it, darling? She went, yeah, you know they say, mummy, red sky at night, angel delight. I was like, no, sweetheart, we don't say red sky at night, angel delight. We say red sky at night, shepherd's delight. And she went, oh, and went on with her day. And I thought, what a brilliant lesson in terms of taking feedback and moving forward with your learning. Because as teachers, when people give us feedback, as educators, when people give us feedback or development points, most of us go away and panic about them on our own and think we must be the most awful teacher or awful leader ever to walk the earth. And we obsess about them and we worry about them and we forget about everything else good that we're doing, everything else effective that we're doing, and we fixate on that one little bit of feedback where we did something wrong. What my toddlers taught me is to just go, oh, I didn't know that, and now I do. And take it as an actual learning point, not a criticism. Toddlers are brilliant at getting feedback. They are told no millions of times a day. They are told that they're using the wrong word or the wrong piece of cutlery, or they're putting their shoe on the wrong foot. They never, ever take it personally and obsess or fixate about it like we do as professionals, like we do as adults. So when you're next thinking about worrying about something that you've done in your leadership role or in your teaching role, is to think red sky at night, angel delight. Oh. So that's about accepting feedback and also recognizing that toddlers are learning machines. They are absolute learning machines. And we need to replicate that as educators as well. We need to model always being a learner in our professional learning and in our wider life as well. So the next one, little story I want to tell you about being more toddler is this one. Now, these are my two daughters, and I have given up, completely given up, trying to get a photograph where they're both looking forward, because my little one is completely in awe of my elder daughter. She's completely in her thrall. She really is. And you'll see by those pictures that she is literally her hero. She copies everything that she does. She wants to be like her. And when I was watching them, I just thought, how brilliant is that? That's what I need to do. I need to find somebody professionally to look up to and to inspire me. The kind of uber stellar colleague, the one where you just think, wow, how do you do that? Tell me, show me, teach me how to do the things that you do. But we don't necessarily do that enough as professionals. We don't seek out brilliance and kind of surround ourselves in other people's stardust and think, how can I learn from you? How can I find out how you have this impact, or you've gained this knowledge, or you've developed these skills? And I've been lucky enough in my career to always find one colleague in every place that I've worked that's a little bit of stardust, the person who kind of makes me go, whoa, I want to be more like you. So what I would encourage any leader or any teacher to do is to go out there and find somebody brilliant. Find somebody who gives you that look on your face, like my little youngest daughter looking at her big sister. I want to be like you. I want to be able to do the things that you do. And then ask them to show you, ask them to share their professional wisdom. Because again, the more that we share what we know, the more we share what we can do, the better the outcomes will be for the children in our care and the communities that we serve. So we're finding somebody to look up to who inspires you. How do we do that though? Well, one of the greatest things you can do is ask for a mentor. Go and find somebody and ask them to mentor you. There are lots of organizations out there that offer free coaching, professional coaching, free mentoring, or just ask the person that you think is brilliant, because I've done that many times before, and I've never had anybody say no. I've never had anybody who I've gone up to and said, I'd really like to learn how you do this. I think you're doing it brilliantly. I'd love to learn how to do it. And nobody's ever turned around and gone, no, thank you, go away. I'm keeping it for myself. So it's having the confidence to seek out a great mentor, to look for coaching, to look for networking events. Today, when you're here surrounded by colleagues, it's a brilliant opportunity to share what you know and to build professional networks that will help us to serve our communities better. It's also finding specialist groups to join and to align with. It's interacting with social media. It's finding out who are the leading experts in particular fields, tapping into their expertise, and going to things like this, CPD events, and doing professional reading. Find those people who are stardust and align yourself with them. The next one, the next toddler thing is about the monster under the bed. Leadership can be really, really scary. There were times in my leadership journey when, frankly, I was terrified, absolutely scared stiff, because I was completely overwhelmed by the responsibility of what I had to do to keep the children in my care safe, that I was dealing with public money, all this parental expectation, the weight of assessments. It can feel really, really scary. Now, when a toddler is scared, when a toddler is having a bit of a nightmare, when a toddler is having the equivalent of the monster under the bed, what they don't do is they don't sit there and think, I know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to work through this by myself. I'm just going to lie here quietly, worry, fixate on it, and try and do it all by myself. What a toddler does is they lie there and they think, I'm absolutely terrified, and they shout for help. Now, in our house, it was always, Mummy, Mummy, at the top of their voices. but they knew somebody would come in and help them through that moment. And that's what we need to do. When our work is challenging, when our work is difficult, when we feel we've been given a task that maybe we don't know the right process or procedure for, maybe it's the first time we've come across having to do this and we're really unsure of what to do, when we are overwhelmed by really tricky cases that we're dealing with in schools that might involve HR or child protection, this is the point where we have to be like toddlers, and when the monster's under the bed, to shout for help. And as leaders and as teachers, we're really bad at doing that. We think we should have all the answers. We think we should know everything. And actually, if we're to serve children really well, we need to tap into that community of knowledge, that professional community of expertise that's out there. And if you've got great mentors and you've got great professional networks, then when they do find a monster under the bed, you can tap in to what they can support you with as well. So if you find yourself in a role where there's a monster on the bed, be more toddler and scream for help. What you need to do is to seek that professional help, be it HR support, be it support with child protection, be it support with recruitment or payroll or assessment, whatever it is, seek that help. And seek that guidance as well from trusted mentors, from trusted colleagues in the profession, and get reassurance when things are scary. Most of our job is an absolute delight, and I would tell anybody who has even got the slightest inclination to go into school leadership to do it, because it's wonderful. But there will be times when you need somebody to hold your hand when things are a bit more challenging. The next one kind of links into this about seeking help and prioritizing self-care, is about meeting your basic needs. You will never find a toddler who says, I'm terribly sorry, I know I'm starving hungry, I know I'm absolutely ravenous, but I've just got to finish this spreadsheet before I come for lunch. In fact, I'm not going to have any lunch, I'm just going to work through it. They don't do that. It's, Mummy, I'm hungry. Nanny, I'm hungry. Granddad, I'm hungry. They seek out meeting their basic needs. Same for sleep. Now, I know my children never really slept properly, but my little one, the youngest one, would come up to me at some points in the day and he would say, Mummy, I need a rest. Can I go and lie on my bed? I need a rest. Recognizing that he was tired. What we do as teachers and leaders is we say, because I'm a qualified educational professional, I no longer need to eat. I no longer need to exercise. I no longer need to sleep. And I never need a wee between 9 and 3. But we are not like that. We have to meet our own basic needs. Cutting sleep and cutting food, especially in periods of stress or pinch points, is like a pilot flying through a huge thunderstorm and saying, do you know what I'm going to do now? I'm just going to cut the engine. I think that would help. So it's a reminder that toddlers always meet their basic needs. We as education professionals need to make sure that we do exactly the same, that we meet those needs, that we make sure that we are humans first, educators second. And the middle picture there is a picture of me and my 3, who are now quite big. We're out on a little scooter ride there. It's prioritizing the importance of play. Now, everybody's definition of play will be different in terms of what you enjoy doing. You might bake, you might like going dog walking or hiking or skiing or whatever, reading, whatever it is that you do that you deem to be play, is prioritizing that. No child in any class wants to say, Miss, what did you do at the weekend? And you say, I updated the SLF and I did 2 lots of action planning. Nobody wants to hear that. A child wants to hear that you did go walking, you played tennis, you made a cake, you visited your sister. They want to hear that you are human first, educator second. Also, we're painting a terrible picture of our profession if children think that we genuinely just live in the art cupboard doing action plans all week. We need to make teaching an attractive profession, so we need to show that there is space to play. Also, play is restorative for children, it's developmental for children, for toddlers, it is for us too. We need to do those things that restore us. We need to have restorative activities in our lives that mean that we come back to our work fresh, invigorated, and with new ideas as well. And there's a lot of research around the fact that when we are doing things like walking or swimming, repetitive physical activity, that's when brilliant ideas can come to us as well. Some of my best ideas that I've ever had in leadership or education have come to me when I've been swimming or just on a long walk, because it frees up that space to have that creative thought. So prioritizing time for play is so important, not just for role modeling to the children, but for yourself as well. You need to come back on a Monday morning refreshed and ready, not exhausted because you've been blinking in the light, the blue light of an LED screen all weekend. The next one is about smashing stereotypes. So you'll see 3 pictures of my children there. Now, my eldest one, I've already said, is a really good athlete. She's a fantastic footballer. Now, I'm so pleased about England's success with the Lionesses for women's football in England, because it really has helped to smash some of those ingrained stereotypes that remain about girls and football. So whenever we are addressing anything in teaching or anything in leadership, we need to have this focus on smashing stereotypes and recognizing that we are in a position to do that, to model that. My middle daughter there, she was born prematurely. She was very poorly when she was first born. She had problems with her hips, problems with her movement. She's asthmatic. She had problems with her hearing. And that is her with her little number on, doing her first ever 5K run with her dad. And this is the child that sort of at a particular age we weren't sure was ever going to walk. She has completely smashed every kind of glass ceiling imposed on her by anybody who's ever had any kind of interaction with her. She's completely exceeded everything that we thought, because she has smashed that stereotype of what people thought she could or couldn't achieve. And then there's the little fella helping mummy doing his Cinderella moment. But it's being mindful that everything that we present to children and present in leadership is an opportunity to challenge and to say, you can do this and you can do it differently, and you don't have to do it like this. And the co-headship that my colleague and I set up back in 2009, when we first set that up, was a huge stereotype smashing. Now, before that, everybody thought that headship had to be one person, 100% of the time, completely present, wearing the superhero cape, devoting their life to the school. And what we showed was that we were not only one of the first co-headships in the UK, we were the youngest as well. And during the co-headship, between us, I had 3 babies and she had 2 within co-headship. And at the time, we didn't think we were doing anything different. We just thought we were getting on with the job of work. What we didn't realise at the time was that we were paving the way for many, many co-leadership positions to be developed, both locally, close to us, regionally and nationally. And now in England, there is a national push by the Department for Education for flexible working, especially in leadership. And I'm an advisor for on the specialist advisory panel for that down here in England. But it is always thinking, how can we innovate, smash stereotypes, and say to our children, say to our staff, you can do this, and we don't have to do it like we've always done it. There's the opportunity to innovate and to do things differently. And that's what my children taught me about smashing stereotypes. The final kind of story really is about every day being a new day. Now, this picture, I love this picture here. It's my 2 little ones reading. So about 2 minutes before, maybe not even that, maybe 30 seconds before this picture was taken, they were squabbling over those books, fighting over those books, and the big one walloped the little one over the head with one of them because she wanted the one he'd got. But as you can see there, they are kind of best of friends again now. And this is again what Toddlers taught me, is that every day is a new day for them. They don't hold grudges. They don't go over and over things in their mind again, which gets in the way then of that positive, unconditional positive regard and that positive talk about what we're trying to achieve. They don't go over and over things again. When they've had feedback, they don't lie there analysing it. They also hold their hands up to apologise. Toddlers will be the first to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mummy. Sorry, Daddy. We need to do that as well as teachers. There's no shame in saying, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. What can I learn from this? Let's do this differently next time. This didn't work. We have to hold our hands up and apologise. And also that idea of no negative self-talk. Nobody in teaching gets up in the morning or leadership and says, what I'm aiming to do today is an absolutely rubbish job. I want to do an absolutely awful job by everybody I come across today. Everyone in education is working incredibly hard all of the time. Everybody I know in teaching gives so much to their role, and so much thought and care and attention and pride in their work. Yet when the slightest thing goes wrong, we tell ourselves that we're terrible. It's all awful. Everything's wrong. Toddlers don't do that. Toddlers don't do negative self-talk. They kind of look at their mistake or their error or their misjudgment of a situation dead in the eye, and they say, I'm sorry, and they move on. So every day is a new day. And if we think about it back with the kind of the innovation and the strategic risk, every day is a new day to kind of do something innovative, different, to smash those stereotypes and to think, how can we get further on to where we said we were going to go, that real clarity of that, the vision for what we're actually trying to achieve. So in terms of what we can learn from toddlers, there's an absolutely massive amount. And I've gone through a few of the stories today from Be More Toddler. There are many, many more in the book, all about what they can teach us, what we can learn from them, how they can show us that we can do leadership differently, and that we don't have to be the superhero leader, that there is more than one way of leading. And also recognizing that regardless of what position we are in, whether we are class teacher, senior leader, trust lead, authority lead, whatever it is, every single person in education is a leader. Every single person has influence with what they do and impacts on our children, our communities, with the decisions that we make. And we need to go into those decisions with the confidence and the honesty and the openness of toddlers, because they are the ones that are brilliant at creating whole-scale organizational change without having to be a superhero. And if you have any inclination to be a school leader or to take the next step in your career, I would wholly encourage you to, because leadership for me has been the greatest adventure I have ever had. It's been absolutely fantastic, and there is nothing that is more of a privilege or more of a joy to turn up to a school and know that that whole community and all of those children are in your care, and you get to curate and create that wonderful curriculum and kind of global offer of your school's world for those children. So I would encourage you to be more toddler, be brave, take risks, be positive, know what you stand for, what is your chocolate buttons, what are your, what's your celery, what do you believe in? Go away, question that, think, why am I doing what am I doing? And once you're really clear about that, is to go out there and have that leadership adventure, and to kind of think, yes, I can do it. I'm going to go out there, I'm going to smash those stereotypes, and I'm going to lead within education, because leading within education and creating the worlds for our children that we serve is the greatest joy in education. Now, I've been under strict instructions not to overrun. So that kind of brings me to the end of what I was of my slides to share with you. I don't know whether Ollie's going to pop back in again and say hello, but if you've got any questions or any queries or anything you wanted to add, then I am around for a little while. Otherwise, that's me. Thank you very much for having me, and I'm so sorry again that I couldn't be there in person. As I say, we've had a family bereavement and I was unable to travel, so thank you very much for having me, and I hope you've had an enjoyable session.